Welcome to the May 7th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. We'll begin our meeting with a roll call.
Commissioner Milstein.
Here.
Commissioner Mills. Here. Commissioner Gibrandal. Here. Commissioner Ackerman. Commissioner Briggs. Here. Commissioner Sauve. Here. Commissioner Trudeau. Here. Commissioner Weatherby. Here. Commissioner Woods. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Do I have approval of agenda? Do I have a move by Commissioner Trudeau, seconded by Commissioner Woods? Do we have any discussion or changes to the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose? It's approved. Moving on to introductions. Do we have any introductions this evening?
Nope.
All right. Minutes of previous meetings. Before us this evening, we have the March 5th, 2019, March 19th, 2019, and April 2nd, 2019 meeting minutes. Without objection, we will take them all together. Do you have a commissioner that will move it? Moved by Commissioner Gibrandal, seconded by Commissioner Mills. Any changes to the minutes or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose? Moving on to reports. We'll begin with a report from our City Council representative, Mr. Ackerman.
Apologize for being a minute tardy. Last night, City Council had a meeting. Got out. We got out early this morning. A handful of conversations around land use issues. First and foremost, the accessory dwelling units ordinance amendments were voted down at first reading. There will not be a public hearing on those amendments. With respect to 309 South Ashley, property near the corner of Ashley and Miller, the site plan and brownfield plan both were approved. With respect to Bristol Ridge off Pontiac Trail Townhouse Development, it was postponed until the June 3rd meeting based on staff advice. We also approved an annexation on Riverview, and is there one? And the parking district amendments regarding Briarwood were approved at first reading. So for temporary outdoor sales. Oh, and then also food trucks ordinance amendment was passed at first reading, which we've discussed in the P districts. No, commercial, sorry, it affects parking, but within other commercial districts. I believe that is all. I'm pulling up my notes now, though, so if I missed anything, I'm sure Mr. Leonard will.
Sounds good. Moving on to Mr. Leonard for your planning manager report.
I think Councilmember Ackerman did well. That's everything I had. Just a quick update. The working session next week will have 3 agenda items. So I may push your 2-hour target, but we'll see. One will be presenting a proposed dark skies ordinance. This would reflect restrictions to outdoor lighting in the community. Second is taking a look at our work program for the coming year. And then lastly, it's been requested to spend a little time on how we use the sustainability framework in the context of land use decisions. So while I don't anticipate we'll finish that discussion, I hope to start that discussion at that working session.
Thank you. Planning Commission officers and committees. Does anyone have a report? Commissioner Mills.
Just to say that, just to say that the ORC met 2 weeks ago, and we looked at the history of the R4C. R4C amendments and trying to figure out where we go next. And we'll see where we go next. There's a lot that we could bite off, but we also are interested in kind of seeking council's direction a little bit.
Great. Thank you. Any other planning officers or committee reports? Commissioner Ackerman.
Sorry, 2 other items of note that I neglected. One was a rezoning of a township parcel on Warrington on the northwest side, and the other was with respect to the Gelman Plume. City Council took action to create a letter that will hopefully be co-signed by other interveners in our case with the polluter Gelman, and ideally, similarly, advocate that the governor send a note to the EPA requesting their continued involvement at a federal level.
Thank you. Written communications this evening. We do have 2 written communications, so please take a look at that. Moving on to audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to an item that is not listed on the agenda? If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to an item that's not on the agenda, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes to address the Planning
All right.
Commission.
My name is Mary Stewart Adams, and my address is actually 3794 Portway in Harbor Springs, Michigan. And I'm here because Professor Sally Uwe is not, and I'm not here to represent her because I would be a sad representation. But I'm here on behalf of the work that we've been doing for the outdoor lighting ordinance. And there's something specifically that she mentioned to me in an email, and I'm just going to read it out to you because that will make the most sense. And there seems to be some discrepancy in what's being suggested for the Ann Arbor lighting ordinance and what is in the sign ordinance. And what she's recommending is that if you wanted to, you could just strike most of the discrepancy and have it say in the sign ordinance that you should refer to what's in the lighting ordinance, rather than having it occur in 2 places. And in some places, the language might not exactly agree. Would you like me to read this whole thing, or would you prefer, is that enough?
You have 2 minutes. If
I
you'd like
have
to read
2
it,
minutes.
go right
Okay,
ahead.
here I go. Let's see. Everything is on page 9 and 10 of the sign ordinance. The main thing is that there's a provision where there is an accepted suggestion for top lighting, but realizing that's difficult, there was later an allowance for an 1,800 lumen light from below. This is a total exemption for such lights, unacceptable because it would include a 120 watt naked bulb. Our solution, this group that's been working on the lighting ordinance, is to just dispense with that exception and to ask for you to follow the Ann Arbor lighting ordinance. Specifically, illuminating vertical, non-horizontal targets should be partially shielded such that light falls only on the target. This has already been, you've already seen this in the Ann Arbor lighting ordinance version 1. And it seems that you were fine with that when it was introduced. So in the same vein, the rest of the edits are almost to make the language and approach consistent between the sign ordinance and the Ann Arbor lighting ordinance. So her suggestion at the end of this email, if you wanted to, you could strike most of this and just specify that signs should be illuminated in accordance with the Ann Arbor lighting ordinance, and that will be enacted later. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Thank you for letting me be here, and thank you for all the great work, and especially thank you to Sally, who's not here to receive my gratitude, but, okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission at this time?
We're just ears for Sally as well.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, moving on to public hearing scheduled for the next business meeting.
For the next business meeting on May 21st, we have several agenda items. First up is, as referenced during audience participation, is proposed amendments to the sign ordinance. This would be proposed amendments to the Unified Development Code to update and modernize requirements for signage. Next is the Garnet rezoning and site plan for city council approval. This is a proposal to rezone 325 East Summit Street from C1B to C1A and construct a 10-unit condominium building with 14 parking spaces. Then we have 2 public projects by resolution of city council. Public projects that exceed $250,000 in value should seek comment from the Planning Commission as to what standards or private development standards they are or not meeting. So we have 2 proposed city projects for that regard. One is an expansion of the Ann Ashley parking structure. This is a proposal to add 3 levels of parking to the existing structure at 121 West Ann Street, including LED lighting, stormwater management, additional bike parking, and additional electrical vehicle chargers. Next, we have a project at 4150 Platt Road. This is the material recovery facility project for city council approval. This is a proposal to install 2 new scales with the associated infrastructure to support them as part of that recovery facility. And then the final agenda item is consideration of the master plan. This is an annual snapshot and consideration of the master plan documents and their appropriateness.
Thank you. All right, we have no unfinished business, so we are down to regular business, and 10A is amendments to these sections of Chapter 55, Unified Development Code are proposed to correct errors or amend the current language in sections 5.15, 5.17, and 5.37. And we will begin with the staff report from Ms. Studio.
Thank you. Staff are proposing actually 4 amendments. I think that you'll see in the staff report, there may be a reference to 5. But tonight we are proposing 4. We will be, as a side note, I think in June, we'll be coming to you with a few more. But tonight we are proposing 4 amendments, 3 corrections, and 1 change. The staff report details them all, and plus there is the proposed ordinance language, makes it a little bit lengthy of an attachment. I'll hit the highlights for you, not every single page. We do need to put forth the entire section that is being amended, even if it's just one item or one cell. Some of our amendments tonight are trying to, for the future, make that a tiny bit shorter, and I'll get into that in just a second. The first correction that we are proposing is in section 515, table 5-15, on about towards the end of the table, which will be several pages into the attachment. The cell with medical marijuana processor in the M1A district is blank, but it should have a P as a permitted use. Also to the table, we are proposing to break up the table to table 5:15-1, 2, and 3. 1 would be the primary use table, 2 would be the accessory use table, and 3 would be the temporary use table. If we were then to ever do an amendment in the future, we would only need to put forth that table and not the entire table. We are recommending approval of that. That is a correction to the UDC. The second correction we are proposing is to section 517.3A. That section incorrectly includes parkland as something that counts towards, or that does not count towards your lot area. I've got the original ordinance reference number, if need be, but this appears to be an error that was in the Chapter 55 zoning ordinance that was brought forward into Chapter 55 Unified Development Code. But we are proposing just to simply go back to exactly the previously approved language that was in the 80s. So the paragraph should read, lot area includes land donated or to be donated to the city for public park purposes, which is acceptable to the city. Lot area does not include the area of dedicated or proposed public right-of-way or the area of private street easements in the R1 and R2 districts. Our third correction is to, in section 517.5, table 517.5. It is the non-residential and special purpose zoning district table. The error is in the R5 district row maximum front column. It currently says none, and it should say 50 feet is the maximum front setback, and footnote F. But I've also proposed a few amendments to clean up this table a little bit. There was a footnote E that says garages may not exceed height limit of any abutting zoning district. E and the cell for P maximum height where it says equal to, it's the largest cell, equal to lowest maximum height of a abutting residential zoning district. I think this was when the table was being created and playing around with what goes in the table, what gets footnoted. In the end, I think we repeated ourselves. So I'm proposing some cleanup, and then the footnotes get renumbered. But the original purpose of the amendment is just to fix that R5 maximum front cell where it currently says none. It actually should be 50 feet. And the footnotes say that if you have more than one front, you only need to apply it to one front. Footnotes also say that it applies to new buildings built after a certain date. Finally, our change that we are proposing, we are proposing a change in section 537.2, which is the definition section. Front lot line currently says a lot line separating a lot from a street, period. And our amendment would be to add excluding lot lines separating I-94, US 23, M14, and alleys. The definition of street is not in the UDC because it is in Chapter 1 of the City Code. And the definition of streets is actually the definition for street, highway, and alley as a lump. And it talks about how highways and alleys are streets, which is fine when you're talking in transportation purposes. In front lot line purposes, it's sort of becoming an issue, particularly with our maximum setbacks were introduced. We don't want the buildings to be close as possible to the highway. While that may not be bad, if you have both a frontage on a highway and on a collector street, your building should be on the collector street, not on the highway, so that your parking lot goes in front of the collector street. So we're proposing this change. And that concludes our proposed corrections and changes to the UDC. Staff is recommending approval. I can take any follow-up questions or further explanation.
Thank you. Moving on to audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the amendments to Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Sections 5.15, 5.17, and 5.37 to correct errors in the permitted uses table, consideration of parkland donations in lot area calculations, and the R5 district maximum front setback requirements, and to amend the definition of a front lot line. Do you have a commissioner who will move? Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Trudeau. We are in discussion. Commissioner Trudeau.
Thank you, Alexis, for the corrections and the cleanup. One really small thing is there are two ands in the sentence in front of us, and M14 and alleys. So I would suggest taking the first and out. But that's the only thing I had to say.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Commissioner Weatherby.
This might be a little thing, and I don't know if it applies, but there are some sort of alley-type areas where there are houses that front onto that sort of little, not really a cul-de-sac. There are some in Myron Court, or it would be, I mean, I think those are streets, not alleys, but is there any place that this could cause problems if a residential building wasn't actually on a street? Or are we just aren't enough of those?
In Chapter 1, now the last sentence of the definition, street, highway, alley, says, "The word alley shall mean any such way or place providing a secondary means of ingress or egress from a property." So for places like Myron Court, it is very skinny, for sure, but that wouldn't meet the definition of an alley because that's the primary access for those lots. So I have not come across in my experience where not considering an alley as a front, and frankly, we've not been applying fronts to alleys. Like in the downtown, there's no front setback. We don't take the front setbacks in the downtown area. I understand there might be concern. There's perhaps some situation I'm not thinking of, and I would respond that that is the purpose of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we see the slide for 517.3A?
3A, but, well, yes.
This is probably more out of curiosity than will be impactful, but so this was originally, this was language originally passed in the 80s, and then it looks like at some point it was removed from the zoning chapter?
It was, we believe inadvertently.
Okay.
I've got a forensic analysis.
Okay.
It appears, unfortunately, this has happened before, but it
Okay.
appears that when you propose an amendment, and then another staff person comes along and proposes an amendment, if you don't take the most recent version, if you take an old version, then the new amendment gets overwritten inadvertently because of versioning control.
Does the UDC help to eliminate that risk?
It should.
Good. Well, very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you.
Commissioner Mills.
Mine is following up on that exact issue. So how it's written now, and going back to the 1980s version, is this how staff had been interpreting it for the last
Yes.
30, almost 40 years?
Yes.
Okay, so this was one of the things that we should have caught in the process of the UDC, because when we were creating the UDC, we were trying to go with how it was actually being interpreted rather than especially where there were conflicts.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. I just want to make sure it's not changing practice and the things that we've seen we've seen a lot of park donations, right? Especially up on the northeast side. And so as long as we've been interpreting it as we are now
Yes.
drafting it.
Right, and we must have had a project recently that came up and said, oh, no, you don't get penalized for parkland donation, and someone must have said, well, where does it say that in the code? Like, oh, wait, no, that's not right, and then we'll go back and do the search through the code to find out, where was the correct one. But yet the history of this amendment is that your floor area ratio or your density would be established prior to, so we do not want to penalize anyone for doing a parkland donation. It specifically says here that lot area does not include public or private right-of-way, and that's you take your lot area afterwards. There may be benefit to changing that, but that should be billed as a change, but this is a correction. We have the documentation to demonstrate that this is a correction. But the UDC it's an ordinance now. You can't just change an ordinance.
Very good, thank you.
Ready for a vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's approved. Moving on to 10B, 614 Riverview Drive. We will start with a staff report. Ms. DeLeo.
Thank you. This is 614 Riverview Drive annexation and R1B zoning designation. These folks are proposing to annex to connect to city water and sewer. The Riverview Drive area is off of Getty's near the Huron River and Gallup Park. Staff is recommending approval.
Thank you. This time I'd like to open up a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Wilson-Berry annexation and R1B single-family dwelling district zoning, 614 Riverview Drive. Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Woods. Do we have any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose? It is approved. 10C, 2019-2020 City Planning Commission meeting schedule approval. We should have that in your packet. Any discussion? So the only topic of conversation is July 2nd. So July 4th falls on a Thursday this year, and we generally have canceled that meeting for the last couple of years. Any feedback on that? How do you feel, Mr. Leonard, about that?
Certainly at the Planning Commission's discretion, we could go ahead and leave it on here. That sets up that expectation of having it should we have petitions, but maybe we'll make an extra effort to make sure that we would have adequate attendance at that meeting prior to confirming any projects for that. And if for some reason we have a lot of people on vacation, we will cancel the meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Commissioner Briggs?
There's one.
Same here. Commissioner Ackerman?
Could I suggest also that if there are any major site plans coming through, perhaps not putting it on that agenda to give the public opportunity to give input?
Well, did I just hear 4 people already know that they will not be here?
All right.
I would propose we strike that meeting.
Okay. Removing the July 2nd, 2019 meeting off that list. All right. Any other, Commissioner Mills?
If we're making that move, will we have the working session, or will we turn that working session into a public hearing? Or should we just wait and see what happens?
At this point, I would recommend keeping it as a working session.
Okay.
All right. And then Labor Day? That's September, or, hold on, what day is Labor Day this year?
Probably September 3rd.
September, oh, so it's September 2nd. So our meetings move to the 4th. Okay. Very good. All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the amended?
Anybody move it?
Oh, moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandal. All those in favor of the amended schedule for 2019-2020, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, moving on to audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to anything? All right, see no one. Is there any commission proposed business? We are adjourned. Thank you.